CityCast from Explocity.
And now here is Steven Pinker, cognitive scientist, with his Thinking Person's Guide to Writing in the 21st Century. This is the subtitle of his wonderful The Sense of Style. Writing is an unnatural act. It follows, therefore, that any attempt to write better or differently is doomed to failure, because that is simply a way of piling artificialities upon an original artificiality. And yet, every generation is told that language is degenerating very fast. That's a line from a complaint in 1785. And that kids today are degrading the language and taking civilization down with it. There is no need to panic. Clay tablets of the ancient Sumerians have complaints about the deteriorating writing skills of the young. In fact, Don't Panic might as well be the title of Steven Pinker's elegant, calm, and calming book. Style, says Pinker, matters for at least three reasons. First, it ensures that writers will get their message across, sparing readers from squandering their precious moments on earth deciphering opaque prose. Second, style earns trust. If readers can see that a writer cares about consistency and accuracy in her prose, they will be reassured that the writer cares about those virtues in conduct they cannot see easily. Style, not least, adds beauty to the world. The joy of Pinker's book lies in its tone of easy amiability, simple and logical explanations, and its use of examples from popular culture, including comic strips. In this, it is distinct from books by most of those mentioned above, that included Strunk and White, George Orwell, and a whole lot of classic writers on the issue of style. These tend to be hectoring and suggest that it is my way or the highway. Lynn Truss, for example, says that people who misuse apostrophes deserve to be struck by lightning, hacked up on the spot, and buried in an unmarked grave.
Ouch! Misuse an apostrophe at your peril. Suresh Menon ranks among the better-known cricket writers, not only in India but anywhere. I know this to be true. I checked. That passage you just heard was Suresh reading from his newly minted book, Why Don't You Write Something I Might Read? The title of which, he explained, is after his wife, presumably fatigued by his writings on cricket, asked him that question. It probably caused Suresh to skip a beat because his book is subtitled Reading, Writing, and Arrhythmia. It's a pretty good title. It describes what the book is about, and that is Suresh Menon's life in literature. Now, he points out that the world has known a number of literary figures writing on their favorite sport, like Vladimir Nabokov on chess, Joyce Carol Oates on boxing, John Updike on golf, and Ram Guha on cricket. But you might say that Suresh drove opposite to rush hour traffic because he's a sports writer with an interest in literature and did something about it. His delightful book is available everywhere that books are available, and it is the sort of book that makes you want to meet the author. So, let's meet the author. Here he is. Suresh Menon, I am delighted to welcome you to the Literary City.
Thank you very much, Ramji.
Let's get one thing out of the way here. Why does anyone write any book?
I always wonder, Ramji, you've taken the thought out of my head. Some people write because they can't do anything else, and they don't see it as a job or a calling. They see that it's something that they can't do without. It's not that they are writing the book is writing them. Ved Mehta is a famous example of that. He loves to say that. Then there are others who just want to make money. I just wanted to have fun. And I wanted to show the reader what fun it is if you are reading. And I hope that comes across in what I've written. Just the sheer fun I've had.
Well, writing can be fun when you have craft and experience on your side, right? Not when you don't.
Oh, well, yes.
But on the plus side, you can train yourself to be better, like sprinters who go to the gym to be able to run the 100 meters, right?
No, absolutely. True.
So, you do believe it is necessary for writers to go to the literary gym. Quite evidently, you do.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just that I've been doing it for close to 4 decades. So I don't even think about it. I'm constantly trying to get more precise, knock off the flab and that sort of thing, which I do sort of mentally, even while reading a book or a newspaper. I'm constantly sort of editing it in my head. But that's the training, I guess. But the fact is that I have been training to write for all these years, and hopefully in another 40 years I'll have really got to where I want to.
Well, you've paid your dues and you can call writing fun or whatever you want. Now, you pointed out that quite a few literary figures wrote about sports, and that you, as a sports writer, decided to write about literature. In your career, did you see sports writing as a literary thing? Was it tempting to bring one into the other? And let's talk about your literary side.
Well, I don't know if I had a literary side to me, but I was always an obsessed reader. And I was a literary snob, as I think I've mentioned somewhere in the book. And I read a lot. In the early years, I was specifically told not to bring a lot of my reading into my writing, because you're writing for a particular kind of person who necessarily someone who's read Joyce. Therefore, you have to write simply. And the whole idea of writing is to make yourself understood. And I think that was very, very good advice, because I think with the slightly incorrect guidance in the early years, I might have had a career that lasted about a year and a half, shunned never to darken the doors of sports departments again,
Or the toy department?
or the toy department, as it was then called.
Sports writing has a certain style and flair untypical of any other reportage. Why is that?
Because sport is that way. And to write about sport any other way would be doing it a disservice. I mean, you watch a beautiful goal in soccer, or you watch a wonderful cover drive in cricket, and if you're going to get stuffy about describing it, you haven't done justice to the performance. So there is something about sport itself that brings out that aspect of writing. In fact, Brian Glanville, a well-known football writer, said that his idea was to write a copy that would be read without embarrassment by the elite, and with total comfort by the working class. He is an English writer, needless to say.
Class distinctions in sports, not unknown. So, sports writers don't think of themselves as literary.
No, not at all.
Allow me to persist. To write with flair and drama requires a certain skill. Now, isn't it just tempting to slip into something literary?
I don't think sports writers, and this includes myself, ever think of ourselves as literary writers. And in case we did, we are quickly disabused of the idea by our seniors. Uh, we'd like to think that we serve a particular function in society, and we'd like to think that the subject that we handle gives us a wider range to choose our metaphors and our writing from. I do not know if you would, without embarrassment, call a sports writer a literary writer. I mean, I was listening to an interview by Ian Rankin, the Scottish writer, and he said when he started out, he thought he was a literary writer and not a genre writer, not a crime writer. So he said the first book he wrote, he thought was in the same league as Robert Louis Stevenson and all these other top writers, Scottish writers. So he said, but when he went to the bookshop, he found that his book was under crime, and it upset him very much. So he took his books and put them in the literary fiction section. But he says over a period, he understood where his place was. And we sports writers certainly know where our place is.
There's no fooling the Dewey Decimal System is there now.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about cricket players who've strayed into the spoken and written word, commentary and writing. I specifically mention Sunil Gavaskar and Navjot Sidhu. I presume you are well acquainted with both?
This is, of course.
Dish on them, if you will. You know, Navjot Sidhu is highly entertaining, but let's start with Gavaskar.
Well, I once called him a poor commentator and he didn't speak to me for years.
Funny.
If that answers your question.
It is funny to think of him sulking in a corner. And what about Sidhu?
Oh, Sidhu is no commentator as far as I'm concerned. I think Sidhu is just stand-up comedian. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, Sidhu was also a delightful friend when he was in his playing days. He was an extremely diffident. You wouldn't believe this. He was an extremely diffident person who never spoke much unless spoken to, who had to have things explained to him in certain ways in a crowd. And then suddenly after his playing days, he becomes this I don't know, this stand-up comedian who has a nation rolling over itself in laughter. That's fine. I mean, but it's not my style. Let me just put it that way.
Sulking and showboating, it is to the manner born, isn't it? But again, to put yourself out there and perform isn't easy. I mean, there is a certain performance to Chris Gale just standing at the crease.
True. I think all entertainers know this. All performers know this. That if you are manifestly enjoying yourself, and you communicate that to the audience begins to enjoy it just as much. Or the audience gets that message, and which is why all entertainment is about communication. A sportsman on the field of play is communicating a certain personality, a certain human type, and sitting in the audience, you pick up on that and you enjoy it or not enjoy it, as the case might be. But it's still communicating itself to you. And I think to come back to your earlier question, I think writing is that to a large extent. The writer is saying, "This is what I'm enjoying. I hope you enjoy it too." There are writers who think, "Well, if you don't enjoy it, tough noogies. That's not my problem." And there are other writers who say, "No, if you don't enjoy it, then it upsets me very much." So it's you've got to. That's the game you play.
Speaking as a writer, I know how difficult it must be to bring the magic of the moment, to capture the magic of yesterday's moment in prose. The sports writer has my admiration.
I suppose he needs to be a bit of a poet to get everything so precise and so concise, more than precise, really.
Well, speaking of poetry in sport writing, there was poetry in sports. Poetry, you say, was an Olympic sport.
Poetry was an Olympic sport, but you won't find it on the Olympic website because I think they're highly embarrassed about it now.
Yes, you're right. I did go and check, and there was nothing. But happily, there's Google. Now, it surprised me that the earliest known entry in Olympic competition, which is poetry, was Pindar in the 5th century BC. Pindar. Now, yes. I read what he wrote and I found it hugely incomprehensible. But hey, it's Pindar.
And in the finest traditions, many of the Olympic reporting today is equally, in the Pindar fashion.
Literature and poetry as an Olympic sport, really? And here I thought that the games were invented for young soldiers to show off their physical prowess.
Well, to give a modern example, I would imagine that prizes like the Booker and literary prizes and poetry prizes are a version of the kind of competition that might have existed then. And also, of course, your definition of what sport is. If your definition of sport is large enough to include poetry and whatever literature, I suppose then you have prizes for it.
Honestly, I don't see Greek tragedians lining up on stage in a beauty contest. Back to your book. I completely enjoyed your description of George Plimpton's small ball theory.
It's a wonderful theory, except for my, extension of it, of course.
I am referring to your extension of it. Would you care to tell our listeners what we're talking about?
Well, George Plimpton had this wonderful theory that the smaller the ball in sport, the better the quality of the writing.
A fascinating theory.
Which is a nice theory, interesting theory. And I kind of extended that to take in the fact that perhaps that is why some of the best writing in sport is on boxing. And I leave it at that.
And, that puts paid to the whole business of bullfighters having the biggest cojones. and then Hemingway. Back to the business of good writing, what is your measure of skill in the craft?
There are a few basics, I suppose, readily available and mostly quite boring. But the really top writers are able to either bend those rules to fit their temperaments, or to break them all together and still communicate as effectively. But in this instance, very personally.
Sure, someone might want to bend or even break a rule, but shouldn't they know that they're breaking a rule?
Oh, yes, I agree. I think you should know the rules before you break it.
And isn't good grammar a formative thing?
When I speak to students in university who want to become sports journalists and they ask me about writing, I say, in the first year or maybe first 2 years, please write all the purple prose you want. Please imitate everybody under the sun. But at the end of that period, say a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, get the whole thing out of your system.
I suppose your subtext is, an educated you is a better you.
One has to take that for granted, yes.
Closer to home, we do know that poor grammar ails Indian writing in English. What about the others? Is there Chinese writing in English and African writing in English?
That's a good question. There are excellent Nigerian writers who write English. Teju Cole, for example, is one that readily comes to mind. But I'm not sure how much of Nigeria is there in his writings. Perhaps if you wrote more fiction, that would be more apparent. And there are writers who do not write the perfect English of well, I don't even know if there is a perfect English of anything. Their prose does smell of the earth they were born in.
But they appear to have consistently good grammar. Why don't Indian writers?
They're caught between two worlds. They're not quite off the soil. They're using a language that they can't twist to an Indian situation, let's say. And this is something that Amitav Ghosh, for example, has often commented on, saying that there is an issue for an Indian writer writing in English because the form and content don't match. G.V. Dasani, who wrote the classic in 40s. I mean, he got that Indianness right. He got the language, he got the rhythm, the tempo, beautifully. All about H. Hatter. He got it beautifully in that book, and T.S. Eliot praised it for being one of the great books, etc. And that he's got Indianness very well there, as I think has Amitav Ghosh himself or any of the top Indian writers in English have got that. But the problem is you have the in-between writer who's not comfortable enough as an Indian writer, as an Indian artist, as an Indian professional, nor is he comfortable in the company of the better class of English writers. And so in between he finds a language that doesn't quite fit in either of these places. And I think that's where and that's a whole big, the middle ground there is rather large, and it's a very tricky one to get out of. And then what happens is you get popular for writing that kind of stuff. I mean, you sell books in hundreds of thousands, and then what happens? You then say, oh no, I shouldn't be selling so many books. I should write better and sell fewer books. No, that's not going to happen.
It's that validation of mediocrity. Many Indian languages have a formal written style and an informal spoken style. Now, speeches are made with formal language, but asides are delivered in parlance.
Excellent.
Instead of jousting with grammar, maybe they should bring that split style of writing to their English language writing. But it's a thought best rejected. That said, it doesn't seem to faze copywriters. They have to write copy in English, and what they write has to be translatable across the idiom, across all Indian languages.
Rushdie was a copywriter, don't forget.
Yes, so Rushdie was a copywriter. I had forgotten.
So you suddenly reminded me the story about Hitchens, Amos, Rushdie, and probably Ian McCowan, who are all close friends, how they used to have fun with words and sentences and alter one word in a Shakespearean speech and get something else, or add something, and the sheer, and this is again coming back to what I was saying earlier, the sheer fun they had doing this. I mean, these are some of the most successful and respected writers around, and here they were sitting and like that schoolboy fun, which is what I was which is a part of what I was saying earlier about having fun reading or having fun writing.
When you quoted Amitav Ghosh's Trapped by Language, you also made a mention of the pre and post language experience. What is that? Is that a words cannot express how I feel thing?
Partly that, and it also I think means that you tend to lose some of the nuances. I mean, when you're talking about your bunch of students trying too literally to translate a popular song, I think that's what it amounts to. The fact is that when you do that, you lose the nuance, you lose the meter, you lose the rhythm. I mean, translating poetry in my book is some of the most difficult things that one can do. Honestly, there are untranslatable words in every language, and to get that across, you don't translate that word, but to get the sense of that word across in as few words as possible is where the craft lies, or where the art lies, really.
Speaking of the art of writing, understandably, writing is a very personal thing. But I've noticed that literary criticism is not objective always. I have seen it to be personal, opinionated, and very, very rarely objective. It's always someone commenting on someone else, not someone commenting on the craft of someone else.
Well, I think the best critics, James Wood of the New Yorker, for example, the best critics combine the two very effectively, and it's and you don't even notice, but it's the lesser critics where you notice this dichotomy, where you notice this thing between the writer and him as the reader, and I get what you mean. I mean, a lot of criticism is very personal, but I don't think that's because writing is personal. I think it's because they just lack the tools to combine the two. I think that's the bottom line again. Good read. So if it's a good read, there's no issue. But it takes somebody who's in complete control of his craft to combine the two, and that is where the problem lies, I think.
You wrote evocatively about meeting Naipaul. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him once, and he told me that he thought French writers thought it was beneath their dignity to read a book that they were reviewing.
Yes, it prejudices them.
It prejudices them. You wrote about something that has been quoted more than once. Naipaul's comment on the fatwa on Salman Rushdie.
Oh, yes.
That Naipaul said that a fatwa was a rather extreme form of literary criticism.
True, yeah, I've seen that all over the place. This was at a dinner at our place. We were living in Chennai then, and I was very young. I must have been in my 20s or something. Then I suddenly finally sort of whipped up the courage to ask him what he thought of the fatwa, and this was around the time the fatwa had just been declared, and this is what he said. Assassination is an extreme form of literary criticism, and that was. I mean, you can't go beyond that. I mean, once somebody has said that, you should quickly, shut your doors and windows, pack up everything, because you're not going to get anything better than that.
Quit while you're ahead. How did it get out from your dining table to the whole world then?
Because I wrote about it.
And I agree that it doesn't get better than that. What a quotable quote. On that high, I'd like to thank you, Suresh Menon, for being with me on The Literary City. And to our listeners, please buy that book. It's worth every word.
Thank you. That's very kind of you, Ramji. I had fun. Again, my favorite sort of my measuring rod, so to say.
It was great fun for me too. Thank you so much for being here. And now it's time for that funnest of all segments. And to help me is the funnest of all co-hosts. And as always, I will let her introduce herself to you. Go right ahead.
Why, thank you. I am Pranati, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
Hey, how are you doing, P with an A? What's up?
Hey, I'm good. So listen, in your conversation with Suresh Menon,
Yep.
another fascinating interview, I might add.
Thanks. He was a fun guest.
Yeah, but I never knew that poetry was an Olympic sport in ancient times.
It was, wasn't it? Well, not so ancient. It was an Olympic sport right into the 20th century.
No way.
Yes, way. It's true.
Wow. And then what happened to it?
Don't know. One day it vanished without a trace.
Why?
Who cares? I'm simply happy it did. Hell, maybe they used the poems as fuel for the Olympic torch.
Hey, now you have a description for poetry. How does it go again?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to offend budding poets.
Oh, please. Yes, you do. But I insist anyway. What do you call poetry?
Inspired typesetting.
See, there. It's very endearing.
You made me do that. Okay, P in the A. What's the word?
Yeah. So in your conversation with Suresh Menon, you used the phrase to the manner born.
Yes, I did.
First, what manner of manner? Manner or manner?
Manner.
Hey, like manner, Manner, and manner, Manor.
Ah, yes, that's correct. To the manner born. Which one do you know?
Manner, to
Go
the
ahead.
manner born. Like meaning one was born to that particular behavior.
Right.
Like for example, say, like if you're talking about Prince Harry and he's acting all regal, then he'd be to the manner born.
That is true. And if that hot girl from Suits did it?
The girl from Suits.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you mean Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex?
Yeah, his wife.
Yeah. Well, she'd come off like a total bollocks.
To the pretension born.
Yeah. Okay. Now the manner and manner difference.
All right. Okay. A person who is to the manner born. Now, if I'm ever going to say Manor, I will say it. Otherwise, I mean Manner. All right. So a person who is to the manner born is one who shows certain behavioral traits, tastes, and habits. Like you might say of someone that your friend who seems very in control at a social function. You might say, Sonia is charming at dinner parties, as if she were to the manner born. While that is the case, it usually is applied to something aristocratic because it generally suggests that, you inherited these traits with birth.
Right. Yeah. Like born with a silver spoon.
Exactly.
And all that.
Correct.
Yeah. And Manor, manner?
Okay. So to the manner born, the manner in that phrase Manner, for some reason at some point in time, got switched to Manor. Now, aristocrats were generally born in manors, right? Like the one in Downton Abbey, that big building. It's a manor, you might say.
Yeah.
So if you were born into privilege and acted that way, you would be to that manner born, which means that because you were born in that privileged household, in that house, you were to the manner born and you acted that way. So essentially, there's not really a tangible difference between to the manner born and to the manner born.
Right. Yeah. It is pretty much the same thing.
Correct.
Yeah. But now the etymology of that, and please, no ancient Greece.
Oh.
You already did Pindar.
I did. Okay. No Greeks, no gifts.
Yeah. And no Trojan horses.
Okay, fine. No problem. All right. There's a sort of the earlier version of the phrase was Manner, to the manner born. And to the manner born was probably coined by Shakespeare.
Invented half the words anyway.
He certainly did. And in an exchange with Horatio asks, is it a custom? And Hamlet replies, I marry ist. Translated, it means, yes, it is. So he says, I marry ist, but to my mind, though, I am native here and to the manner born. It is a custom. Now, what he means by that is the words, though I am native here, and to the manner born, it is a custom. So he means to say that as a local person, he is to that manner born. So you can just tell a local person by their manner. Do you get it? So Hamlet
Yeah,
is
that makes sense.
Yeah. Hamlet was written about 1600. It was published in 1603, apparently. So the manner version with the O, M-A-N-O-R, comes much, much later, right? And there's some debate among etymologists, and they're always fighting with each other. Think about it, etymologists. What do they fight with? Maybe quills, right? Now that there's computers. Anyway, the earliest reference that that etymologists have found to the MANOR usage was in the July 1859 edition of the Times. In a story, a report about the Emperor of France visiting Europe, and the phrase went, before Solferino, Austria was only an intruder in Italy, and now she is as one to the manner born. In the early 80s and late 90s, to the manner born with the MANOR was the name of a very popular BBC comedy series. Very funny show. I've seen it.
Oh.
And it was...
nice.
Oh, completely. It was the story about this aristocratic woman who is all alone in the house, and she's in this big manor, but she's broken, can't deal with it. So she's living in the outhouse and lets out the main manor to a upstart, nouveau riche kind of guy. And that exchange, how it is. So
yeah, that must have been a fun show.
So to the manner born, MANOR did come later, but the big deal among etymologists is, did it happen as a play on words, or did it happen by mistake because people heard it one way and then spelt it in a different way? Nobody knows, and to tell you the truth, nobody cares. And that's it.
That is true.
See, no grease.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And anyway, all this talk of aristocracy, I shall now repair to my strawberries and cream.
Oh, that diet. What a gilded life you lead.
Yeah, right. I am to the manner broke right now.
Go be broke and enjoy your strawberries and cream. P with an A. I hope your landlord doesn't hear this episode. All right. Thanks for being here. Bye now, and let's do it again next week. If you'd like to discuss a word or a phrase, let us know and we'll call you. Find out how to contact us in the podcast description. And that's our show. Thank you so much for being here. See you again next Wednesday.